So, Mr. Bright Apia, welcome. Thank you very much. And this is a conversation that's brought to you by the Star Ghana project as part of our Missions Ghana initiative, funding from the USAID, Danida, the UKAID, and the European Union. Mr. Bright Apia is head of Child's Rights International Chief. So this is an update. Good news, bad news? What is it?
Yeah, well, good. And so I think that there are some elements that you have to deal with, in the sense that even the decision to stop the children is not because the system demands that they should stop it, but because it has been revealed. That is why they stopped it. So there is a lot of work that we have to do still with the system. If you listen to the Director of Education, the District Director of Education, you would come to the conclusion that he's not even abreast with what happens on the ground, because the work of the security supervisors is to update you on what is happening in all schools, so that you can take appropriate actions where there is anything going contrary to what the system provides that you should do. But clearly, it is something that is not in place. Secondly, you would also realize that when it was as a result of this story that he charged the security supervisors to go into it to find out even the decision that the parent agreed on. But we all know that when it comes to the involvement of a parent in the school management, there's a processes that you have to go through for you to endorse it before the school can even put into effect, where you expect the PTA to take a decision, forward that decision to him as a district director, and then the district director will forward it to the regional director to the national level, so that they will give endorsement to it before they would allow children to, or they would allow the school to even implement that particular policy. So even if the parent agreed and he's not in the know, and they still went ahead to implement that particular aspect of the policy, then clearly it tells you that he's not really in charge of the work.
He argued, for example, that for some of them as supervisors, they don't even have fuel to go around. They don't have the vehicles to even go around. So is it justified?
Yeah, these are all administrative issues, but it doesn't take away the fact that the system should not do the right thing. Otherwise, the teacher who also did that can justify his position of using children to do the things that he did. So we should not really place issues on the logistics. We know that generally there are logistical issues that we go through, especially when it comes to the management of schools in this country. Because, for instance, schools are supposed to carry audit. The Ministry of Education is supposed to carry audit on all schools to find out schools that are in a good condition, the number of chairs, desks that will require to be able to do what you are supposed to do in our school, the textbooks that we need and all that. But for some time now, over the years, we've not carried out any audit in the management of schools in this country. So clearly, if you really want to make the argument that people are not doing what they are supposed to do, then we can even make the same argument at the national level. So we have to really see how best we can deal with issues relating to school management and how members can take action and ensure that they do what they are supposed to do.
Okay, great. So now then, Dr. Wejiwo Asere, for example, is excited about this conversation, but it doesn't end like this. The children are still sitting on the floor, and you are a child's rights person. Tell me the impact on in fact the contact hours and how their upbringing is even helped in any way.
No, it affects everything about children, especially where the environment needs to be designed in such a way that it promotes learning. So if the structure or the way the classroom is designed is not comfortable for children to learn, definitely you can't expect the outcome that you want so far as their learning outcomes are concerned. Teacher absenteeism will be high in those areas. Children's inability to come to school would also be very, very high. And even the appreciation of what the whole system is for so far as education is concerned, children will not appreciate it the way we've designed it to be. So clearly, there's nothing good that you can say about that. And that comes back to the issue of the audit that I spoke about. Because clearly when the minister was asked about how much would they need to be able to put all the infrastructure in place in all our schools, he mentioned almost about $2 million to be able to do that. But clearly, we really want him to speak on the basis of they carrying out audit in all those schools to find out what exactly we will need to do that. And for some time, I've not been able to do that. So clearly, you can't talk about it properly, because there are a lot of schools that are going to the same issues that we need action to resolve those issues.
Absolutely. We're being joined by President of Imani Africa, Mr. Franklin Kojo. Welcome, Chief. And
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much for joining us. So we're having a conversation about a breakdown somewhere in Bandai, where children are asked to go onto the farm to, as it were, make money to support education. And this has been sanctioned by the headmaster, but it's been shut down by the district supervisor because it thinks it is not fair. I want us to flip the page and look at the other side of decentralization, because there's a DCE, there's an MP, there's a district director of education. They're all part of the governance structure within that corner. Is it your view that since 1988, when we started this whole decentralization process, has it helped us, for example, in terms of education and health?
Well, first of all, good to see my good friend, Wright, and it's as usual very eloquent. Let me say that your first question is an interesting one, but I think that it speaks to the issues around availability of resources. I mean, if a headmaster in his own wisdom believes that some people ought to do some labor in order to, as it were, support the school system. I mean, of course, if that's the background, really.
Okay.
Is that the background?
That's the background.
All right, okay. Then presumably there's a critical resource need that ought to be looked at. Of course, the issues about child labor may also be examined. But it brings to the fore the national policies that have been adopted as we speak in order to make education accessible for everybody. Some people have argued, including ourselves, that we need to look at the issue of resource allocation properly. And resource allocation, not necessarily from the kitty of the government, because governments can do just so much and not everything. There's a certain sense that parents may be willing to come along with some of the costs.
Okay.
I suspect that is what might have informed the headmaster. By the way, this is not the only headmaster who's asked pupils to perform some kinds of tasks.
That's correct.
Remember, some headmasters try to be innovative because they believe that even under the free system, there are still challenges, and wanted parents to pick up some of the tabs, but they were muzzled and shut down. It is all good when the government wants to ensure that everybody, a flagship project, everybody must enjoy. But the reality really is the government can't do all. So back to the question, which also has to do with of course, decentralization, which is where all these things sit. But the idea is that if you decentralize enough, really, the decentralization itself should be able to pay off. But if you micromanage the decentralization process, where allocations to critical sectors like education and health themselves are micromanaged or even capped, what it means is that you are already shortchanging the process of ensuring equity, equitable access for these services. Already, it isn't even enough.
Okay.
But for me, I've always said that the greatest legacy of President Nana-Addo will be when we go the full haul of ensuring that every DCE, MMCE, everybody who represents anybody at all, from the door catcher to the most important person in a party, must be elected.
We're told that deadline will be later in 2020. But
that's the challenge.
So 38 new districts have been created, in addition to the 260 we have. My question then will be, is the creation or the expansion of the number of districts really zeroing in these issues? You have spoken about resources, you have spoken about the governance. And for example, in a district or in a neighborhood, everybody would run to the MP or the assemblyman, forgetting that there are other members that form part of the local governance structure. What is it that is our problem? Is it the expansion that we're not looking at, which is not correlating with fixing issues of health and education? What is it? What's the problem?
Our problem is that the politicians have decided to represent themselves in such a way that they'll continue collecting rents. And by doing so, they want to be what's the word? Make themselves like mutants.
Okay.
You know, a mutant, they keep replicating each other.
Right.
Fact of the matter is that we don't need them everywhere. And so we need to put a stop to the creation of districts. Already, this country is a small country. It's 28 million people. Roughly the population in Australia, I think Australia is a little more. Australia is a continent, if you think of it that way. But it's the 12th largest economy in the world, right? And if you look at the fact that some of the things they do in terms of governance and the things we do in terms of governance, if you put us together, we actually a pale shadow, really, when it comes to the effectiveness of the governance systems we have. I mean, you have districts that are virtually $1.5 billion worth. Some are not that much.
Right.
And you think that what you need to do is to continue dividing them up as a way of bringing governance and what's it called, reducing poverty.
Right.
It doesn't follow that way.
Okay.
What you need is resources. And to the extent that these already existing districts should be allowed, right, to determine their own future with some minimal support from the state, that would be the unraveling of the whole conversations around poverty. We cannot continue dicing up the country into bits and pieces and think that that is the way to make the country more developed. If that's the case, then I'm sure every family would have a little portion of their own place,
land space
to rule. I was going to share an analogy.
You were telling me about a certain expose that you wanted to put out.
Oh no, an analogy.
An analogy,
the way
right.
we are dividing up the country into bits and pieces. See, in the 70s, there's a famous economist, an American economist, Nobel laureate by the way, Milton Friedman, who went to China and then found out that the Chinese road engineers had given shovels to Chinese workers to dig pits in the hope that they'll construct roads. And then he asked them, well, in this day and age, as of the 1970s, there were tractors.
Okay.
And he said, why don't you use tractors to make it faster? The Chinese engineer said, well, they need to create employment. That's why they need to give shovels to people to dig pits. And the American retorted, then in that case, why don't you give them spoons? Because with spoons, there'll be a lot more people employed to dig more pits. Then you'd have had full employment. Okay. It's the same analogy here. You think that by dividing up the country, you bring development. When it's a question of efficiency, right, of governance, not dicing up the country. If that's the case, as I suggested to you, let's go and get a piece of the land and control it as well, and resources will come closer to us. I don't think it is the best way to go at all.
Right. Let me bring you in now. So there's the central government, there's local governance. What are we to have? Cooperation or competition? And what do you see?
Yeah, for me, I don't really play my attention on the two things that you have mentioned. Cooperation is a normal thing that you have to do within the decentralization process.
Does it happen?
It doesn't, because sometimes you see even a department under the judicial assemblies where they are not coordinating to do what they are supposed to do. So clearly, it is something that we need to do to ensure that at least that coordination exists. Okay. But the whole point is that what is the essence of decentralization? Okay. That is the key question that for me, over the years, we've not been able to answer. For that matter, we keep on focusing or paying attention on the structural formation of what the decentralization would give to us, creating more districts, creating more regions, thinking that is what will facilitate development. But for me, it moves beyond that. Decentralization, the essence of it moves beyond the formation or the division of these structures and all that. See, the essence of all this is to provide service to the people. Right. So if we have a lot of districts, we have a lot of regions, and we are not providing the services, we'll still be where we are, because we've not been able to answer that particular question. So if, for instance, the district is supposed to take a decision and we know that they are the governance structure at the district level, and still the district needs their resources from the central government, and the central government is still holding on the resources. You know, quarterly release of their common fund do not go as supposed to.
So the DC is supposed to be head of that local government structure,
and you'd have to be in charge of your district.
But they don't report to the people they govern. They report to the president or the central government.
That is where the issue is, because the essence of it is that you need to also develop that relationship with the people that you are governing. So if you are not in that position to do what they are supposed to do, then I think that the whole concept of decentralization, we need to open it up and for people to understand the concept of it. Because now, even if you look at the behavior of political parties in terms of even ruling within their own system,
right,
you realize that coordination is not even there.
Okay.
People feel that even within one political party, you see the kind of divisions, because you expect people to express their opinion, but they need to follow a certain structure in making their argument.
Right.
But you realize that even within the same party where you'd also express some level of decentralization, you don't see that coming out to play in terms of their behavior and their conduct. So clearly that has also permeated into our administrative structure that we've set up, which of course most of it is appointed by the president in terms of its governing structures and all that. But the people must be in charge.
Frankly, raises the question of having to vote for these people. Is that an opinion you share as well?
Yeah, for me, the voting is very important. But even to vote, I've followed some political, I did political system when I was doing my master's. So clearly, you realize that the kind of concept that we are promoting here is not really assisting us in terms of what exactly we call democratic processes for people to do what they are supposed to do. But if we want to elect these people, it's a fair idea, because the people must be in charge of it. Right. But those people who are going to vote, what is their understanding of the process?
Absolutely.
You see, otherwise, because I was even sharing with Franklin that the recent primaries that the MPP internal elections and all that, you will see that people are fighting to be in the executive position to vote. And their understanding is that when they have the power to vote, then they can attract resources to themselves. So the whole concept that they have is very, very important. And we need to let people understand that the whole decentralization process is not for a political agenda to bargain your own space, but to provide services to people. That should be the whole thing. So if they are postponing the date and they are not giving the real reasons for doing that, then we have to question, because it is also a manifesto promise, which for me, people might hold the government accountable for making that promise and keep on updating in terms of the date and all that.
Frankly, let's look finally at the district. The creation of a district is supposed to transform the lives of the people. Let's look at resources. The fact that monies that are voted to the district from the central government comes to them, but nobody comes with instruction as to how the money has to be used for. So we read recently how in Agona, 81,000 has been used for a funeral when students still don't have desks and hospitals are still suffering. Let's measure that with their internally generated funds and see if there are misplaced priorities in managing the funds that the district has to itself.
Well, first of all, there's there's a lack of coherence in the way the whole system has been designed, because presumably all these districts have district implementation plans.
Right.
But there was a time I met a planner at I think the Eastern region, one of these districts, and he said, "Look, I'm just an armchair planner. Whatever I do here has no bearing on whatever plans that we have designed and whatever the central government has decided to do. Already the funds are capped. It takes a long time for the funds to arrive.
Right.
That's another administrative problem. Eventually when they arrive, they are not in sync with the district implementation plans.
Right.
So there's not enough to go around. And because of these relationship where the DC reports directly to the presidency, there's no proper accountability. It's the only reason why someone may spend 81,000 cedis on a funeral. The other thing about the IGFs are also very interesting. You see, the IGF question is an interesting one. People say, well, they'll never have enough IGFs anyway because these districts are not productive. The reason they are not productive is because you appoint persons who are not productive to head them.
Okay.
And because of that, they don't see the value. They are not being elected, so they don't see the value to be innovative, to retain their position by ensuring that the districts will grow.
Right.
Otherwise, when we visited our farm plains, I think during the last administration, we were doing a project of water. That's about 5 years ago.
Okay.
We visited our farm plains area. We spoke to some of the DCE at the time.
Okay.
And it was at the same time that they were trying to redraw the boundaries of the district. Now, this district had 80% of its IGF from a market called Mamikrobo.
Okay.
Now, because the DCE knew that he was going to lose Mamikrobo if the redemarcation was done, he was scheming to become DCE of the newly created district that will have Mamikrobo as a place.
So
lack of total, exactly. So because the system has been designed in such a way that it's basically rent-seeking, it's power-driven, it's not driven by innovation and progress. So what happens is that you don't see any form of imagination that can help grow the country. So that is the issue. And the last point I've got to make really is about, Bright talks about resources being the focus. I mean, there's no point in the central government employing teachers, doctors for these regions and districts. It shouldn't be the case.
Right.
If these districts have been empowered through competitive politics, they would find their own levels.
Absolutely.
And besides, look, this country has only 55 formally registered ambulances that are working. The country should have 1,000.
Absolutely.
And you'd have thought that every district should have 1 or 2, and I mean proper ambulances.
Not hearses converted into.
But we've created ministries. Yeah. We've created ministries that have been awarded cars and stuff with fuel gasoline cars, which could have bought ambulances for this district. So, is the answer in dividing up the districts to get them ambulances? No.
In this country, I can't tell the difference between an ambulance and a hearse, really. And I don't know. But
that's why we use taxis.
Unfortunately. But I thank you very much, Bright Apia. I'm grateful for your time. He's head at Charles Wright International. And Franklin Kujo is the founding president of Imani Africa. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your Monday morning.